All right, friends, so I've started the recording now. Let's proceed. So yesterday we were discussing about big data, the various use cases. We discussed about the primary use cases, and then we looked into the flow of how businesses actually evolved, right? And why we need to look into big data is also something that we understood yesterday. And of course, the four V's. This is for the definition of the big data. Now, before we concluded, we started understanding about the challenges that we have to encounter or handle when we are talking about big data. Now, those challenges are broadly classified into two parts because we are talking about data which is very big, high speeds, and the structure of the data, right? That's also a question because we will be also getting unstructured data. So the storage solutions is something that we need to look at. At the same time, we also have to look into the processing solutions, right? These are the two important things that we need to look at, right? Now, when we talk about the challenges, there are additional challenges that we have to see. Of course, storage and processing is the primary challenge, but we also have to look at the cost associated with the infrastructure. Of course, the unstructured data is itself a challenge to be handled. And then the tools that we have, SQL and Excel, these are the primary tools that we talk about. And another biggest challenge is the scalability, right? So these are the things that we discussed in our class yesterday. And here I want to take you to the mind map. Though it is not, I'm still working on this. So here we have big data and Hadoop and Spark mind map, where we can talk about the characteristics of big data. Let me minimize everything that we have not discussed. So the characteristics of big data, and then we talked about the challenges: storage, processing, scalability, cost, right? These things. Now, if I talk about this scalability as a biggest, these challenges as the primary concern, then how do we actually solve the problem, right? See, storage is biggest concern, and in order to upgrade our systems with respect to the demand or to scale up, we look into procuring the softwares like this, procuring the servers like this, right? So if I talk about a regular laptop, let's say this is i3 core system, 4 GB memory, and maybe 100 GB storage capacity, or maybe you will say 250 GB storage capacity. This is how, right, you can look at your computers, and these are at those days, right? A few years back, these are actually a very good configuration servers, right? But as and how your demand, your requirement was growing, you had to go to a higher configuration server or system. I'm not writing server configuration, I'm writing regular hardware configuration only. So if I upgrade to this, then I will say this is a 5i core system, maybe 8 GB memory, and I will talk about 500 GB storage space. But we'll not stop here, we will again grow. So if I say I have to grow, I will grow to 9i core, maybe 16 GB memory, right? And I'll talk about 1 TB storage. But again, is this enough? No. This is not enough because your data will continuously get generated, right? You cannot stop. So you have to process that humongous amount of data and you also have to store it. But this is the general practice in the industry. This is called as vertical scaling. Now, beyond a point, let's say you have money. So no problem. You're an organization like Amazon or Facebook, right? So you have a lot of money. So you can upgrade from this also. And you have 9i core launched now. We already have 9i core. But yeah, 16 GB is the standard. And you might want to have a 2 terabyte storage capacity. This is the system that you wanted to procure. Right? Now, what is the cost, guys? You also have to look at the cost aspect, right? What is the cost of these servers? Very, very, right? High level cost I'm talking about. You can give it in INR also. How is it increasing, Sandeep? Is it linear? If I talk about this very basic server, maybe I mean basic system, I can get it in 20K or even 10K. If I say this, maybe it is 40K. If I say 7i, this is easily 80 to 90K. And if I talk about 9i core system, it would be minimum 1.5K with these kind of configurations. Right? So if you see, oh, sorry, L, my bad. Yeah. If you see, the cost is exponentially growing. It is not linear. And another challenge is, once you upgrade your server, what would you do with this server? The old servers, what would you do? You'll not be able to utilize that, right? So this is another challenge. So a lot of money is getting wasted in this approach. This is called as vertical scaling or scaling up. And the cost is non-linear. Now, what is the solution for this particular approach? What can I do in order to solve this problem? Now, there was a concept called as grid computing. There was something called as grid computing or grid computers. This grid computers basically work on a concept of distributed systems. That means I'll not have one system, but I will have multiple such systems. Maybe I'll take a decent system, but I'll not have one, but I'll have multiple systems. Now, if I look at a high level, right, at an outer surface, if I look at this system, this outer box as a system, I would have capacity of 4 systems. Let's say this is i5 core, right? So I have 4 into i5 core, 4 into 8 GB, 4 into 500 GB storage, 4 into 500 GB storage, right? This is the grid computers. But the technology did not work because of practical challenges. I'll speak about that. But the same concept is something that we are going to look at now. This is called as horizontal scaling. This is vertical scaling, scaling up. Here, this concept is called as horizontal scaling, or we also call it as scaling out. And this is done as and how you require the server to be upgraded. So you're using, let's say I'm talking about 5i core, okay? A decent enough system. You're using one system, and if your work demands for more capacity, then you're going to have 2 servers. One server here, right? So if your demand is increasing, you will have 2 servers. If you have more demand coming into picture, you have more work to do, then you will take 4 servers. So when you started your work, you had already procured 1 server. Now, how many servers I'm purchasing here? Only 1. So my cost is linearly growing, right? And I'm using my existing hardware. I'm not procuring something new. I'm not dismantling the existing one. I'm not bringing in very fancy new things. I'm using the same regular hardware, but now it's like we are taking the combined forces, right? Now, how many such systems can be interlinked? That depends on the workload that we are trying to solve. So here I have 16 interlinked computers. That means 16 into i5 core computers, right? This is the configuration that we are seeing. And remember, we are not investing all at one go. Slowly, you are going to increase as and how your demand grows, right? So this is how we basically scale up for the demand. This is not a good approach. This is what you are going to look at. But if I have a data, then how do I deal with this data? Now, this is, let's say, a 2 terabyte storage device, right? I have a file. Let's say I'm working for Government of India. Assume, okay? And I have a lot of data, sensitive data, and I want to safeguard it and store it. So this is a single file which is of 2 terabyte storage capacity. Now, if it is a single file, then I can store it in this particular system. Let's say not 2 TB, let's say we have 5 TB storage capacity server here. Okay, this is 5 TB. So if this is the case, do you see any problem in storing 2 TB file into the system? No problem at all, right? Just like how we have, let's say 500 GB storage space, and let's say Sharad is giving you some data, some material, you're going to copy it and paste it into your hard disk. Control C, Control V. Same way, this 2 TB file is getting saved here. No problem. But what should I do in this scenario? We are saying this is an alternative and this is better approach. But how do you handle that? So you have 2 TB file, a single file. Then how do you handle the data in this particular infrastructure? Because if you see each system, we call it as computer or node, each node or each computer, each system has only 500 GB storage, right? Now, how do I handle this particular data? Because I have 2 terabyte file, single file. So what we do? Yeah, what do we do? Yes, very good. We split and store, very good. We split the data. So this 2 TB file can be broken down into multiple smaller chunks of data files, and those files get stored in these services, these servers. So I split them into, let's say, 200 GB file or even 100 GB file, right? So if I have to split it into 200, then I'll get how many? 10 files. I have 16 systems, right? So I can store those files into these 10 files, or 10 services, or 10 servers, sorry. Clear? Now, internally, that partitioning is done and all that. For an external customer, if you are the customer, you are bringing that 2 terabyte file. Then when you store this data in the big data scenario, right, in this architecture, Then for the end user, you will see only a single system here. For the end user, they're seeing only this portion, single system. That single system is capable of this configuration. So I already have how much? 16 into 500 GB storage. That means I have 8 terabyte storage capacity, and I'm using only 2 TB file there, right? So I can do that. For the end user, there will be no difference. That's the beauty of this solution that we are going to look into. Now, there should be a lot of questions creeping in when we talk about this partitioning of the data. We are physically splitting the file, right? And then storing it. Don't you get questions? How do I split it in the first place? Right? How do I split the files here? That's the first question that we need to look at. Of course, these are other questions that you're posting. But the primary question is, how does that partitioning works? Right? Now, I will take a very, very simple regular hard disk. Right? Your regular hard disk. Okay, this is how your hard disk is. Now, if you open the box, you will see all this. And yeah, this is the animated section. Now, let's say I gave you 100 MB file. Okay, 100 MB or whatever that is. I've given you a 100 MB file, and you decided to store it into your disk, computer hard disk. This is how it looks like. So what actually happens in the back end if you're using Windows? You're using Windows. So what exactly happens in the back end? Do you think the 100 MB file gets converted into ones and zeros, right? And then gets written into the disk? Is it written onto the disk in ones and zeros? Ones and zeros is of course correct. At a lower level, the data is getting converted into ones and zeros only. But when I'm copying that data, do you think I'll copy all the data here at one go, 200 MB, 100 MB? If you have that impression, then you're wrong. It doesn't happen that way. Okay, specifically people who are coming from non-IT background, non-programming background, this is not what ideally happens. So what exactly happens when you open your laptop for the first time, or when you are trying to see some kind of troubleshooting? Your operating system is going to look into something called as sectors. Have you observed that anytime? It says analyzing sectors, analyzing boot device. Then it says analyzing sectors. Try and see that. When your system is getting started, and if you have some kind of issues, generally the troubleshooting is happening that way. It says analyzing the sectors. These sectors are nothing but, if you have your hard disk, this hard disk is broken down into multiple sections. Those sections are nothing but sectors. Sectors like this, right? Hard disk is like this. Within that, each location, I mean, wherever we will be able to write the data, right, that is actually segregated as a sector, right? And we generally see bad sector error. Operating system sometimes crashes out saying bad sectors. That means your operating system will not be able to access these locations, right? That's what happens. So each sector here, right, is given an ID for your operating system to work with this storage device. It splits that entire storage device into sectors, and for each sector there would be an identity. Now your Windows is basically using that identity to write system information so that your operating system understands in which sector what file is located in what place, right? So all those bad sectors, I mean, all that information is getting recorded in the system files. I'm talking about Windows architecture here, okay? System files. Now, when you're trying to copy or paste, if you say, I have a 100 MB file which I'm giving to you, if you have to copy this and paste it into your disk, when you say paste, your operating system is going to analyze the system file, or you can say system catalog, metadata information. It looks into this and identifies what are those sectors which are readily available to store the data for. So it looks into the system files and then identifies that free sectors. And then that data gets written onto this free sectors. Right? That's generally what happens. Now, when it is trying to read these full sectors, full list of sectors, sometimes these files get corrupted, system files get corrupted, or your hardware gets corrupted or something like that. And within the system files or system catalog, those bad sectors are identified. Sometimes it is not identified, so you'll not be able to access those bad sectors. That's where your boot takes much time, or sometimes your data, your operating system will not boot up because it's trying to access something which is not working. Right? Later on, if troubleshooting is done, then those bad sectors which are not able to be accessed are removed from the system files. Right? So this is how generally the work goes. Right. Right? Now, the sectors that we are looking at, these sectors at any given point of time may not be sequentially placed, or at a stretch you may not find free sectors. Wherever you see free sectors, this file is getting recorded. Ideally, the sector or at disk level or OS level, the granular level of storage capacity that can be handled is 4 KB at a stretch. Granular level I'm talking about. And beneath that, you will have ones and zeros. Okay. I mean, you'll also have bytes and then bits. Bits is this. In between, you have bytes and we have kilobytes. At OS level, the least granular value is 4 KB. So your 100 MB data is getting broken down internally into smaller chunks, and wherever the sector, free sector is available, the data is getting recorded there, right? And this sector's information is stored in the system files. Now, when you want to access that file or read that file, what we do, we go to these sections. Using the system files, we go to these sections and extract that information to process that. This is the basic functionality of your hard disk. This is how it works, right? If I talk about one single disk, then it is working in the way that we just discussed, right? Now here in the solution that we are talking about, distributed computing solution, right? Distributed computer solution. We are looking at not one system, but multiple systems interconnected. And at the same time, we are also looking at the data, which is not small. So what we do is we assume that each of this disk that we have for these computers that we are looking at Each computer will have its own respective hard disk, right? Now that hard disk is treated as a sector. So this is one hard disk. We treat this as one sector, this as one sector, this as one sector, so on and so forth. And then we'll try to access these files or store the files. Now that one server could have 500 GB or could also be 1 TB storage capacity servers. Is this concept clear? We are talking about scaling out, or we say horizontal scaling. Is it making sense? So scalability is the advantage that we get here. Plug and play architecture. And cost is also another very, very important factor that we look at. Right, yeah. Now, we'll discuss that. We'll discuss that, Anita. I'm talking about many things. It's a name, Sayan. Why your name is Sayan? It's just a name, yeah. Why? Because here you are growing your servers like this, but here you're not growing the server configuration. It is going like this only, right? The configuration doesn't change. You're not upgrading the servers. Hence, it is a horizontal. Understood? Why that name is given is reason this. But why only that name, I don't know. Right. As data will be continuously generated, till what extent it will be stored either horizontally or vertically. Karthik, I think you did not understand the logic here. We are trying to compare the infrastructure that was used and an alternative solution that can be used. Remember, we are talking about the challenges with big data yesterday. And here we are seeing how to handle this big data. Right? And this seems to be the best solution. Now, how many servers you can embed? That depends on the requirement. There's no restriction. I have connected 16 servers. You can go to 160 interconnected servers or 1600 servers. There's no restriction. Right? It depends purely on what amount of data you're going to work with. Right. Now, here, remember I just explained about the sectors. So we are trying to apply that concept here. Okay, it's not literally taking the sectors and all that. Internally, you will have sectors. Your physical hard disk could be there in each system. But for interpretation purpose, understand the logic of how the sectors are being that concept is being used to store and process the data. Same concept is applied here, where each system in that interconnected network, right, is treated as a sector. Okay. Yeah. So that's the logic here, right? Now, how the distribution is working here. So this one file, remember I said 2 TB file I have? I'm splitting that. So the concept here is split. Don't ask me why 3. It's just an example. You can also split it into 30 files. So the concept is to make sure we are splitting this one big file to a smaller file, which can be stored in individual systems. In that entire network, I have systems which are of generic configuration. So my file has to be reduced to such an extent where it can get stored into these services, servers that we are using. Right? So partitioning or split happens. How that split happens, what is the size, and all that we'll discuss. So first thing is split, right? That's where we are basically splitting here and storing it. Now, what if I have split that file? Let's say I have 1 TB single file. I decided to split it into 4 files, 250, 250, 250, 250, right? So we have 4 partitions. Let's say I'm storing that data into 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 servers selected on which the data is getting stored. Now let's say one fine day, this server is gone. So let's say this is server 1, server 2, server 3, server 4, and server 4 is gone one day. I mean, it crashed out. Now, if the server gets crashed out completely, what is happening to your data? The data is crashed. Let's say it is attacked by a virus and entire data get corrupted. So there is no other option. You have to clean this data. You have to deal with this server, right? So we will, let's say, format. The admin comes into the issues. There is no other option. He has to format it to bring it up. So if that is the case, then data is lost. Then what is the fun in having big data systems if you're not able to archive the data? Right? So to safeguard from this challenge, what we do or what the logic does is, rather than having just one copy in one or each of these multiple servers that I have, why not have a duplication also done? Right? There is a duplication also done. What if this duplication doesn't solve the purpose? So let's have another duplication. Right? So this way we keep creating the duplicates based on the number of servers that we have. Now, if this particular server is crashed out, the server is crashed out, that means you still have backup of this particular break or component in, let's say, this system. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 options, right? 4 parts of your file. You have a backup of that file. Let's say we are splitting the data into 3 files, right? Black, green, blue. Assume that way. So even if one part of your data is lost, that is your blue part is lost, no problem, because we do have the same data available in another server to basically support for the computations that we are doing. So data is not lost now because we have a replica, right? So the two things that we do is partitioning, splitting. This is nothing but partitioning, right? And then this is called as replication. We duplicate the effort. I mean, duplicate the data, not the effort, sorry, duplicate the data. So we combine these two capabilities and then we'll get this, right? Yeah. So this is how we distribute the data. We're talking about distribution of the data. And this setup is basically the solution for your big data challenges. We call this solution as distributed framework, distributed platform, right? So we are basically distributing the data. Your data into multiple servers which are interconnected and working as a single server to get, right, different tasks parallelly. Okay. Yeah, Sachin has a question. Question says, if I do backup, right? If I do backup here like this, then the 2 TB file will become 6 TB. Yeah. So this is absolutely fine. Remember I said the storage cost. What is the storage cost today? What is the storage cost? Literally zero, right? Almost negligible. But what would be the cost to the company if they miss 100 records? Or forget about 100, what if even they miss 10 records? What is the cost to the company if they lose the data? Yeah. So from that perspective, if I do cost-based analysis, do you think making the replicas is actually something that we should worry? Should we even consider to compare the expenses? Not required. Blindly take the copies. Google will have 8 backups in across the globe. Google maintains it. I've read somewhere. I'm not sure what is the backup strategy now, but they say that they have 8 backups, and the backups are also managed in different continents. What if there is a natural calamity in America? Forget about natural calamity. What if America and Korea start fighting? Right, the Kim guy. There might be nuclear bombarding. So the entire country is wiped off. So Google will lose data because data centers are there in US, right? So what they do, they strategically place these backups in different continents: Australia, Africa, Asia, and within these continents, there will be multiple locations, countries where these backups are secured. So it purely depends on what is the importance of your data, right? It purely depends on the value your data gives to you. And for Google, the only way they do business is by manipulating the data. So they go to any extent to safeguard their data, right? So yeah, don't worry about the cost incurred by doing multiple backups. That's negligible, right? But yeah, focus on these 2 aspects, very important, which help us manage the large amount of data, splitting and replication. So what I do, I come back to this, and no problem. Even if this even if this data is gone, I have backup of that file in another server. So I will be using this. Yeah. So this is basically the logic that is applied on this horizontal scaling. And remember, guys, this is solving a lot of problems. Storage is the primary concern, and it is solved by using this, right? It's not costly. That cost is also addressed. Scalability, that is also addressed. If I require only 2 systems, I'll use them. But if I need more, I'll just plug in these services, these servers into the network. Just plug and play. So keep adding as and how you require. So scalability, your services do not have to be down. Right? So these are the challenges. Out of all those challenges that we discussed are solved. It will also solve processing related challenges. How we will discuss that. For now, focus on the storage. Right. So horizontal scaling is what we do, and it is based on how your computers are working on your regular data. Sectors concept. Now this concept, right, is called as distributed framework. It's creating a platform where you'll have multiple computers working as if it is a single large supercomputer. That's the impression which is created. But yeah, this is the software that is basically name given as Hadoop. Now this Hadoop software that we are going to look at is a free open source framework. Remember, I'm not saying it as a database. I'm not saying it as operating system. I'm calling it as a framework. It is not a database. It is not an application. It is creating a platform. And this platform or software is free and open source. Now, what does this platform do? It supports storage and processing of large data in a distributed computing environment. That means your data gets distributed, split, so that your data gets stored in different individual servers or nodes. Remember, each of this is a commodity hardware, regular hardware. You can imagine them as your laptops, right? So these systems that we're talking about are called as nodes. Name, another name. So from on, we will be using this terminology node as well. When I say node, imagine that it is one standalone server in the network. This is interconnected network of nodes. Okay. So Hadoop is the name given to this software. Yes, that's right, Gautam. Big data, not just aviation, any big data, this is the solution that was created or developed. Now, see, generally what happens is, I mean, the organizations, right, the challenges yesterday we discussed about, the organizations like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, WhatsApp now, you take any. These organizations are dealing with humongous amount of data, right? Huge amount of data, right? So to solve the challenges that they were having, right, they had to desperately find a solution, and that desperate solution is called as distributed computing framework, or distributing, simply I'll say framework. Storage will also be there, right? So I'll say distributed framework. Yeah. Now using this distributed computing framework, we have a software called Hadoop coming into the picture. This is nothing but collection of multiple interconnected nodes supporting each other. These nodes communicate with each other. They are connected with each other, right? So they communicate with each other and they support each other, right? This is called as distributed framework, guys. So the challenge that you will see with this distributed framework is, who is going to manage that? So for example, if I come back to this, we were talking about one file which is of, let's say, 2 TB. Do you think you will only have one file? You will have a huge list of files, right? Maybe thousands and thousands and thousands of files, isn't it? Now for this one file, we are saying we will split and store that into these different servers. Assume 4 partitions are done, assume. So these 4 partitions that we are doing are placed here. Okay. Now, from here, we also have to look at the duplication, replication, so that we are safeguarding from the data loss. So let's say that is these 4 parts, right? So we have 4 partitions on this one file. That information has to be stored somewhere. What is each file containing, where from where to where it is partitioned, etc. And we also have to keep a track of what are those duplicated servers. I mean, what are those servers where the duplication is occurring, right? Replication information. If I have more replications, then I will also have to remember their locations, right? Now, if I have thousands of such files like this, then who is going to manage all this information? Yeah, who is going to manage all this information? Somebody has to manage everything, right? Do you think manually it would be possible to track all this, right? Splits and replications? No way, right? No way we as admins can remember. Not possible, right? So this concept is what grid computing is all about. So grid computer is very similar thing, grid computing. The only thing is grid computing, the user or the developer or the programmer has to remember which partition is sitting in what location, what is the start point, end point, how many such partitions are there, and where does each partition is located, right? All that information has to be manually maintained, and because of which your grid computer did not succeeded. It did not work, right? It didn't work. So what we are doing here in this, we are basically, right, trying to automate the management part. So Hadoop, basically the software name that we're talking about, right? That Hadoop software is basically looking into these fundamental issues on how to do parallel processing done on the data, because I have multiple resources which are just sitting idle. So I should be able to use the capacity of these multiple servers for processing the data, right? And you only focus on writing the business logic, and the execution part is taken care by the Hadoop itself. You write a code and forget about it. You don't have to manually maintain it and execute it, because Hadoop takes care of that execution part. Right? That's how your Hadoop works. Right? Now, if I talk about history of Hadoop, this is the history. It all started by Google. Remember, I said all the organizations had this challenge pretty common. All the organizations were facing this problem with big data. Google has worked on it, created some solution, and they published a white paper. White paper means unless until you practice it, you cannot submit, right? You cannot submit a white paper. Nobody agrees on that. So 2004, Google published a white paper on a concept called as MapReduce framework. This is how it all triggered. Now, this basically what Google does is, let's say in 2010, they procured a server and they added, they started using it to store and process the data, and assume by the end of 2010, the server was filled up. So Google is very, a rich company. So it can purchase another server for next year. Once the server is filled, we started using another server like this. Similarly, we'll have 2012, so on and so forth, 2020. the server is filled, and now we have 2021 server which just started. Now let's say in Google, you're using one of the Google services. So you had a query, you are searching for it. And Google does a lot of personalization, mind you, right? It personalizes a lot of things. So if you try to use Google here in 2021, let's say today, you do a search query. So Google does a lot of personalization, as I mentioned. So in order to do that personalization, Google needs to understand what did you do in the past time, right? All these past years, what did you do? If you're right, if you're able to figure out what your customer has done in last 5-10 years, then it will give you a scope to at least plan something, isn't it? So what Google does is they have written a logic which basically helps them to retrieve that ID. Let's say this is my ID, right? This is active server where the data gets recorded. Data is getting recorded. Now I will take that ID of that customer and then I go to offline. These are all offline servers, mind you. Right? I'll go to these offline servers and I will check for that ID. Check for that ID in each and every server, each and every year we capture the ID. If you are able to get the details, right, then you can take an appropriate decision. If you don't have that information in the past, then you are going to treat that as a new customer. Existing customers' data would be there. If no data is there, that means for Google it is a new customer, right? So we use the concept of reviews and all that. So we basically look into historical data for seeing how the performance is there for individuals, services basically. Same way here also. If I have to try and capture ID, information about a user, then we fetch the ID, and then using that ID as the key, we keep searching for the information from the past historical data, right? And let's say we have found that information that we were retrieving, we found that we were also doing that previously also, maybe in 2019, before Corona, we were doing it. So that means there is some information in the past, right, about that particular thing that we wanted to do. Assume searching is some keyword. Okay. So because I knew this information, it will be easy for Google to come up with some personalization, right? Some kind of a pattern that user is following and all that. So the idea that I'm trying to project here is Google used this concept of map and reduce to map the data. We are interested in ID, right? Customer profile. So map the ID onto all the servers that we have in the network, archive servers. So that is map. And once you extracted that relevant information, you reduce that information to results. We are trying to reduce the data that we are capturing into results. Reduce it to results. So this is the concept of map reduce, which was launched by Google in 2004. Right? Now, after a year, these two people, Doug Cutting and Mike Caffarella, they both started working on this framework, and they said, hey, listen, what we are basically able to do processing using MapReduce. But copying of the data, storing of the data is happening in offline systems. How can I access the data which is offline? I cannot do any analysis on that offline thing, right? We need online, live servers. So Doug Cutting and Mike Caffarella have brought in that concept, right, for processing. And then they named the software that they created from this idea, right? They named it as Hadoop, exactly in one year, right? These people were able to come up with software. Now, okay, white paper is nothing but blog. You can say blog, technical blog. Yeah. So let me erase this. So remember, guys, the Hadoop software that we are talking about was generated because of necessity. It was not a planned software. It was basically because of the necessity. And because we are talking about huge amount of data, you might have a perception that it is big data. Hadoop is big data. A lot of people think that. But now you know, Hadoop is a software and it is not big data. And because it is storing the data, it does not mean that it is a database, right? So Hadoop is developed and released in 2005, and it is not a database, right? And it is not big data. It is basically called as a platform, right? Using this platform, you can basically come up with processing of your big data, right? So Hadoop is nothing but a platform. And Hadoop has these three core components. The first is HDFS. This is basically the file system. Then we have distributed computing engine, which is taken as is from Google, right? MapReduce. These were the initially two components that were launched into the market, but later on they have also added the third component, which is the cluster manager. And somebody has to manage, right? So cluster manager was also brought in. It is known as Yarn. Right? Clear, guys? So to handle challenges, we looked into the horizontal scaling, which is also known as distributed framework. Right? Distributed means nothing but interconnected systems share the load. The data gets distributed across, and the processing, the task will also get distributed across to the multiple computers which are interconnected. Now, this concept was originated from Google in 2004 because of their white paper. Later year, these two people came up with the software called Hadoop. Okay, and the story of this yellow elephant is because Doug Cutting had a son those years. He had a very small son, and he was fond of his toy. He had a yellow elephant toy, and he was very fond of that toy. So they decided that let's put the name as Hadoop. Yeah. Now I would want you to read the difference, guys. Okay. What is the difference between a database and a framework? We already know what is the difference between big data, right? So what is the difference here? I want you people to study and come up with the answer for this. All right, everyone. try do the research. It's very easy. Try and understand. These are different softwares that we're talking about, right? So just read the definitions and you will be able to identify. If you still do not get it, then we'll discuss. All right. So Hadoop core components are HDFS, MapReduce, and Yarn. Right? So it's HDFS, MapReduce, processing capability, and Yarn. We'll deep dive on each of those components and how that work. Right? We'll understand that. But yeah, let's proceed. Okay, another very, very important question. We're talking about Hadoop, right? A complete new software altogether. But the question is, why Hadoop? Why you want to talk about Hadoop? Right? There's a bunch of benefits. The first one that we need to focus is, if you have seen that, right, the previous slide, the first thing that we focus on is it is free. Then it is free. First and foremost, free and open source, basically. This is the primary advantage. But along with that, there are a bunch of other benefits that we need to look at, because ultimately we are trying to reduce the challenges, remember, right? So free open source means it is not putting burden on the infra cost for an organization. The software procurement and all that is not there. At the same time, the software is working on commodity hardware. Commodity means your regular hardware that you're using. You don't need specialized server, right? So inexpensive commodity hardware. So both these will reduce the cost. And this Hadoop software is basically storing and processing the data, which is humongous, on distributed environment. Okay. So your big data, large data can be processed and stored. Of course, that is what we need. And the computation can happen parallelly because you'll have multiple computers working together to give that impression. But individually also they can process that entire data. So it is parallel computation. Another benefit. Scalable. If you need 3 servers, if you feel 3 servers will solve your problem, then have 3. If your server requirement is increasing, just add the nodes to the network and start using them. Plug and play architecture. Then reliable. Your software that we are using here, Hadoop, can be relied upon. Because even if one backup is gone, the system is making sure that the backup of that file is available. The backup of the data which is lost is available. Right? That's reliable. Scalable, reliable, and we also have fault tolerance. Fault tolerance means we have capacity to right, identify and handle the issues. Fault tolerance, that means if one server is going down, the system can still manage. Right? Fault tolerance. The another final benefit is, very, very important benefit is, read once, write many. This one. Read many. That means you can access the data a number of times. There is no restriction. Right? But when you're recording the data, you can record data only once. Once the data is written, you cannot change it. Hence we say, write once, read many. Now, what is the benefit of read many? Right? We are looking at this, but what is the benefit of read many? It helps us generate the reporting. Different teams can access the same content without any problem, right? So that's read many and read parallel means. And of course, it also works as archival, data archival system. Right? So that's basically your advantage for, analysis. Whenever we talk about analysis, right? Analysis is nothing but working on data offline to generate reports. So that is done using Hadoop systems. So these are the bunch of benefits that we have with respect to Hadoop system. Hadoop fault tolerance case. We just discussed. Same concept. Partitioning and replication, sharding and replication. This is how fault tolerance is handled. That means even if one component of the data is gone, the same component is available as a backup, right? So you're not literally losing the data. So it becomes reliable and fault tolerant. Fault tolerant means one system is faulty, even when the system is working. There's no problem with progressing to the next request, right? Next request that the server is getting. Nothing has to do. The server is down, that's fine. Right? So these are the advantages, guys. Now, I did mention about this, right? Who is going to manage the scheduling of the tasks? Who is going to manage these failures? Who is going to manage the partitions? Who is going to remember the replications, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that's the logic. Okay, yeah, Shruti, I completely agree. But because of the festival and all that, I plan to end a little early today. That's one of the reasons why we don't have break. Yeah, hope you understand that. So when we are having full-fledged sessions, right, we will definitely have break like any other break sessions that we have. Yeah. All right. So yeah, understood, right? Fault tolerance. These features basically are something that we need to look at, which basically give Hadoop a boost on why we need to use it. The question why, right? Because of those features. And we'll look at these components now. So what is HDFS? Hadoop Distributed File System, right? It's called as Hadoop Distributed File System. That basically means your operating system file system. You have OS, Windows OS. For Windows OS, what is the file system that we have? Anyone knows what is the file system for Windows? It used to be FAT, not FAT now. This is old. It is NTFS now. What is the full form of NTFS? We know NTFS is there, but what is the full form generally? It's New Technology File System. NT means New Technology. FS means File System. Right? Now, we have Android OS, right? Remember Android? That is also another platform. It has file system. For Linux operating system, what is the file system? Anyone? Linux operating system, whoever is familiar with it. No one? No? No, it's not FAT32. It's called as XFS3, right? Sorry, XFS, Extended File System. XFS. The older versions were extension 4 and even prior to that extension 3. ext3, and this was the most popular file system for Linux. Now it is known as XFS, Extended File System. What about Mac? Anyone? Very easy. Yes. Apple File System. Right? That's APFS or AFS. Apple File System. Very easy. Dedicated file systems. Right? Now, this NTFS that we are talking about, which is Windows Operating File System logic, does not allow the data to be distributed exclusively. I mean, it doesn't work on the distributed component. Internally, it is anyways distributing the data into sectors. So we will not be able to work with this particular file system for Hadoop. Distributed framework, it cannot be used. The preferred is extension 3 or XFS. Right? Android only, Santosh. The name itself is the file system, right? I think, yeah, Android only. I'm not too familiar, but as far as I remember, it is Android only. Different versions will have different names. Okay. Right. That's file system. So for every operating system, you would have a dedicated file system so that your operating system can understand how the data is actually managed on the storage device. Same way for Hadoop, I basically call Hadoop as cloud operating system. Hadoop is an operating system. And for this operating system, the file system is HDFS, distributed file system. That's the definition. Okay, we'll deep dive into that. Now, whenever we talk about Hadoop, right, we are talking about distributed framework. Distributed framework means we will have multiple computers, not one computer. Interconnected systems. And those interconnected systems are called as clusters. They're called as clusters. Now, this image that you are seeing is from a data center, Yahoo's data center, which is readily available. You can Google for this image. It's there. I picked it up from Google only. And each of this box, right? You're seeing the right one box kind of thing. This is called as a rack. These are individual rack components or racks. Within these racks, you will have servers. So you see, this is one server, one server, one server, one server. Like this, you'll have multiple servers in each rack. Yeah. This is how your data center looks like. Now, we basically identify each of these system as right, a name. Each of that has a dedicated name. Using that, we identify and we configure all those servers to create a Hadoop cluster, to get a Hadoop cluster, right? So these are few of the stats that Hadoop does on that data or on that Hadoop clusters. Yahoo runs Hadoop on a data center which contains 42,000 servers. right? Each of that server that we're talking about is like a supercomputer in itself in data centers. Typical configuration, right, will not go below 64 GB memory. Temporary systems will be 32 GB, right? And I have seen 256 GB RAM also. I have logged into a server which is having 256 GB RAM, right? So that's basically how your right, individual servers will look like, though we are calling it as commodity, right? These are supercomputers for data centers, right? And we are having 42,000 such servers. Each rack that we are seeing here contains 1200 servers. From here till here, there are 1200 racks. You can imagine like data center is like a library. Each rack is like one almara. And in that almara, we have books. Right? So that's the impression that this image gives. Yeah. There are 4 data centers for Yahoo in total, and the single largest cluster, one single standalone cluster, is made out of 4,000 nodes. They are experimenting with 4,000 nodes. When I say nodes, it's nothing but the computers, interconnected computers. Right? So that means Hadoop, Yahoo is or has developed Hadoop by interconnecting 4,000 computers. Right? So that's their network. And they basically process 140 petabytes of data and right, store that and process it on these Hadoop clusters. 140 petabytes of data. This is another image. This is for Google Data Center. Again, this is also from online. And this is one specific corner of the entire data center. Data centers are typically of size of a football ground. Anybody has experience of having a view at data center? Did anyone work? Oh, Ashnar, wonderful. You have the experience. Wonderful. Great, great, great. So how many servers, Ashnar? What is the typical configuration of a server that you have seen in that particular data center that you're working on? Same question, Archana. How many servers are there? What is the configuration? Please share it so that others also will understand. Okay, that is not a full-scale data center, Ashnar. This is the that you're talking about, right? It's not a full-scale commercialized data center. Yeah, but even 60 racks is not a joke. It's very big lab, I think. That is also not a data center. That is a server room. I'm actually talking about a data center. That would be typically of a football ground. One big stadium. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not easy. Oracle has developed its data center in here in Hyderabad. That's the location where I reside. Right? Yeah. Recently, they have started that. Mumbai and Hyderabad. Hyderabad is recently started. All right. So this is about the data centers. And remember, components, I talked about HDFS. That is nothing but the file system. It is a standard, I should say it is a standard which is followed by Hadoop to store, process, and the data. So read write operations of the data are happening on the disk, right? Hard disk, physical disk. So HDFS is a format, or is a pattern in which the data gets written and read, right? So file system for storing this big data sets on a cluster. This HDFS basically allows us to see that entire cluster as a single disk, right? And behind the scenes, the distribution and all those things happen. That distribution and all that experience will not be there for user. It internally is taken care. And then we have MapReduce. This is the programming framework. This is developed by Google. And this MapReduce has two components. As I was trying to explain, we will again look into this concept. We will have mapping job done. And once the mapping job is done and we get the intermediate data, on that intermediate data, we basically right, do the processing. That processing is nothing but your reducer, right? Yeah. Then the difference that Hadoop has with respect to grid computing is this component, Yarn. Yeah. Yarn is basically the cluster manager, which manages the entire scheduling or operations basically. What operations and all that, we will again deep dive into this, but Yarn is nothing but yet another resource manager. Here, resource is nothing but your nodes. Multiple computers are interconnected, right? Each computer is a resource for us. So Yarn manages all those resources. It is basically scheduler, right? And it is also doing the fault tolerance management. It does the memory management. A lot of things are basically done by Yarn. These are the primary three components of Hadoop. Yeah, and Hadoop basically, remember I said, is a platform, right? And I personally call it as an operating system. It's designed for that. So like your computer, the physical computer that or laptop that you're using, it's a physical components, right? Multiple physical components are there. And all of them are binded together by this software called operating system, which allows us to control those physical components and get our work done. Similarly, Hadoop basically has different resources. Those are nothing but multiple nodes, right? So to get all those components work together, we need an operating system, a software which controls all of them, right? So Hadoop is that operating system. Now, once you say operating system, there will be bunch of other softwares that can be worked on this operating system or along with this operating system, right? So Hadoop introduces a lot of ecosystem tools. When I say ecosystem, I'm talking about Hadoop system. Hadoop as an operating system is a holistic software. Within that software, you will have n number of different applications, open source applications that are developed. So we call that as Hadoop ecosystem components, right? These are all the different components. This is a small snapshot, very, very, very small snapshot of the softwares which can be worked along with your Hadoop. We call it as Hadoop ecosystem. Like in Windows, we have multiple softwares. Similarly, in Hadoop, we have all these different softwares. Each software, of course, is designed for a specific reason. We need to try and understand what is those reasons and all that. And that basically gives us the clarity on how to use that particular software. When we start working, probably we will be using maybe 2% of all those softwares, or 3% at max. We will be doing hands-on, right? And yeah, there will be multiple softwares for a specific reason. For example, if you see here, let's talk about SQL on database. SQL database on Hadoop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different options are there. No SQL databases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 different options. New SQL databases, machine learning platforms, right? So this way we have multiple options. We will be using 1 or 2 of those options and getting our work done. Just like Windows. Windows also has a number of different applications, right? But we'll not be using all of them, right? Same way. We will be looking into few of the components like Pig, Hive, HBase, Scoop. These are something that we will definitely look at. And then we'll also have Spark, right? We'll discuss about these components in detail anyways. We'll come back to that. But our focus should be on right now on these 3 components. HDFS, MapReduce, Yarn. Right. Any questions in today's discussion? We talked about challenges of big data and workaround to address those challenges, which is nothing but horizontal scaling, which allows us to interconnect multiple computers together, right? And we call this as distributed computing or distributed framework. And it all started by Google's white paper, the research, and then Mike Caffrell and Doug Cutting, they enhanced that software to give us a software called Hadoop, which basically allows us to deal with big data. Framework or a platform basically is like a stage, right? If you see Windows operating system, that is a platform for your various other softwares to be worked on. In Windows, you will install video players, you will install audio players, you will install Word documents, PDF softwares, different applications. So many things are there, right? In Windows. So it's a platform. It's like a stage. So framework is nothing but it is a stage which basically allows you to work with different systems on that particular stage. See, what we are saying, distributed computing means this is my Hadoop cluster, right? We are basically saying this is my cluster. Internally, the cluster has multiple computers like this, right? Internally. But for external users, you cannot say, hey, I have all these servers. For external users, this is a super duper big computer, powerful supercomputer. That is what your end user should see. So this is Hadoop. It's a platform or a stage which allows users to use the capacity of all these interconnected computers. Making sense now? Yeah. Any questions? RAC is a hardware concept, Gautam. Cluster is basically an idea. Interconnected computers are called as cluster. You might have multiple computers which are coming from different racks interconnected together to create a cluster. Again, see, these are all the keywords for which you need to read the definitions for. It's all from infrastructure side of concepts. I just shown you, right, Gautam? I've also explained this. Where is my Yahoo data center? I've explained about these things, right? What does rack means? How does the servers are interconnected and all that? Yeah, rack is nothing but one box where you will have multiple servers connected. In data centers, or your infrastructure basically is managed by racks only like this. Okay, is it for everyone? Again, the same question. We see Hadoop is a platform, Mahesh. We use different right techniques like Spark is one of the application which allows us to do the real-time processing. As is, Hadoop is not designed for that. Oh, guys, come on. These are very, very basics. Fine. We'll learn that, Gautam. We'll learn that. Let's not jump ahead. I'll talk about that Linux concept also. I mean, why we are talking about Linux. File system. Okay, Santosh, have you ever purchased a flash drive? Pen drive. Okay, did you start using blindly? I mean, as is, it is provided. Can you use it as is and use flash drive? Did you observe that? You cannot. Okay, if you don't remember, that's okay. You cannot use a flash drive as is because your flash drive will have raw pattern or it doesn't have any pattern in it. There's no rules designed for it. It's just a memory device. If you're using this flash drive for Windows, then it will ask you to format the respective file system. How do you write the data onto that raw format, raw device? You need to first define the rules. This is a pattern. If you're using Linux operating system, then here you will have XFS. This is another standard or pattern in which you write the content. It's like you purchase a book, empty book. You can write it anyway, right? It's your choice. So general practice, we start taking the first page. General practice, we take first page and we start writing on that page like this. So that means there is some rules that we are defining on how to we write, right? Same way, file system is like that rules. Read guys. All these are computer foundational concepts. It's not a failure, Mahesh. It was not a failure, but there were some enhancements which were done because of the challenges that version 1 has. Yeah, we'll talk about all that. What are the challenges that we had, right? What is the difference between version 1, version 2? All those things we'll cover. Yeah, Mahesh. By default, it is batch processing only, as I mentioned. We will have to use Spark or any other similar tool for doing real-time processing. Okay. All right, friends. We'll stop the session here for the day. And yeah, I will not be available for a couple of days. We will have our session again on Monday. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you all.